Good morning, 7th grade. This is Mrs. Parkinson, and this is your video called, Is This a Perfect World? You'll need to grab your notes sheet. It looks like this, and it was given out for 7A yesterday in Language Arts, and 7B I had someone take it over to Mrs. Leach's classroom while you're in JCS 101. If you don't have it, you're absent, whatever, it'll also be posted on Teacheries under this assignment. So, is this a perfect world? Welcome to the future. Imagine a world where every year the government selects 24 teenagers and throws them into an arena to fight to the death. This is the Hunger Games. Or where love has been diagnosed as a disease. But thankfully, a cure has been found, and all young people are required to get this cure when they turn 18. This is Lauren Oliver's Delirium. Or where humanoid robots have been invented to serve and protect humans, which works out great until the robots decide that humans would be easier to protect if they had no freedom. This is iRobot, starring Will Smith. Welcome to the world of dystopian literature. A dystopia is an imaginary futuristic world in which society lives under the oppression and control of a totalitarian government, a repressive society, a force of technology, or a corrupt business corporation. Dystopias often start with an illusion of a perfect society or a utopia, but as the story progresses, the reader and characters both realize that this fictional world is the opposite of perfect. Dystopias often focus on a current social, technological, or governmental trend and show us what would happen if this trend were taken way too far. It's basically an exaggerated worst-case scenario. This allows the dystopian story to make a criticism of a trend in our real world. The history of dystopian fiction. Dystopian literature is not new. One of the earliest well-known examples was H.G. Wells' novel The Time Machine, which depicts a distant future in which the human race has evolved into two species, one that herds the other like livestock. The Time Machine was published in 1895. No, that's not a typo. 1895 is when dystopian literature started. Well, before then is when dystopian literature started. Even before that, in 1835, a pro-slavery writer wrote a novel called A Sojourn in the City of Amalgamation, depicting a dystopian future in which black people and white people had intermarried and children together. I know, horrifying, right? The things that they thought were a criticism of our world back then are astonishing to us today. In the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, dystopian literature became a powerful way for American writers to criticize communism and socialism. These decades produced some of the most important dystopian classics, like A Brave New World, Anthem, 1984, and Fahrenheit 451. The next few decades saw many more dystopian novels. A Clockwork Orange, Logan's Run, The Running Man, V for Vendetta, but up to this point, almost all dystopian novels were written for adults. Then in 1993, Lois Lowry published The Giver, and it opened a floodgate. Since the beginning of the 2000s, dystopian novels have become one of the most popular and successful trends in young adult literature. Books like Among the Hidden, The House of the Scorpion, Uglies, The Maze Runner, The Hunger Games, Feed, The City of Ember, The Barcode Tattoo, The Forest of Hands and Feet, or Teeth, Divergent, Matched, Delirium. Those are all just examples of popular dystopian young adult literature. Some common story elements. Most dystopian stories share several common elements or ideas. Citizens of the dystopian society live under harsh control, usually the control of a government, a corporation, technology, or religious or philosophical ideas. The truth about the world is often kept a secret from most of society. The story sometimes takes place after an apocalyptic event that ends the world as we know it and gives rise to a new world and a new way of life. Citizens are expected to conform strictly to society's expectations, and individuality is seen as a bad thing. The society tends to dehumanize its citizens. There is often an illusion of a perfect society covering up how horrible things really are. Sometimes the story's oppressors truly believe that they are doing what's right, but often the illusion of a utopia is merely propaganda meant to keep the citizens under control. This is an example from iRobot. The main character of a dystopian story is often one of the few or one of the first to question the goodness of his or her society. He or she recognizes how wrong the society is, and the character's perspective helps the reader recognize the negative aspects of this world. These pictures are taken from The Matrix, and that is the protagonist Neo, played by Keanu Reeves. The Matrix is a dystopian fiction. Excuse me. Creating a dystopia. In general, fictional dystopian societies usually form in one of two ways. Number one, society adopts a new form of government or gives power to a corporation or technology or system of belief in order to create a better world or to solve real problems and create a perfect society. But the new government, corporation, technology, or belief system is taken too far and becomes oppressive, unjust, and inhumane. An example of this is in the novel Uglies. In Uglies, they try to create a perfect society by making everyone carefree and beautiful. This solves the problem of low self-esteem, eating disorders, and racism or prejudice. But can you live a carefree life and also be free to think and feel what you want? In the movie Gattaca, this is also the case. In the movie Gattaca, society uses genetic diagnosis to make sure children are born with the best possible genes. This means everyone has an equal chance of being great because everyone is born with great genes. But it also means that people who were born naturally, without any scientific help, are discriminated against, even if they have more drive and talent than their genetic superiors. Fahrenheit 451. Books are such a pain. Seriously, think about all the violent disagreements people have had throughout history just because of ideas. But if you get rid of books, you can get rid of thinking, which would end different ideas, and everyone would get along, right? In Fahrenheit 451, society has decided to keep the peace by burning books and the houses that store them, and sometimes the people that read them. Number two, the second way. Other dystopias are often created after an apocalyptic event destroys most of society as we know it, and those left alive are forced to adopt extreme policies in order to ensure humanity's survival. The government, technology, or corporation given control after the disaster usually begins with a genuine desire to save the world, but it either becomes corrupt and oppressive or it goes about saving the world in such a boneheaded way that it ends up threatening humanity's survival. This is the case in The Maze Runner. In the Maze Runner trilogy, sunflares have destroyed most of the Earth. Then in an attempt to control the population, to make sure everyone doesn't starve to death, the government releases a virus that accidentally turns most of the remaining people into cannibal zombies, and their attempt to find a cure for the disease only makes this dystopia even scarier. The City of Ember. In the City of Ember, a nuclear war forces survivors underground for hundreds of years. To maintain order in their underground city, the leaders choose everyone's jobs and make sure everyone has enough. But those in charge didn't bother to remember how to get out of Ember. What happens when the supplies and electricity run out? In the movie WALL-E. In the movie WALL-E, when the world becomes too polluted to sustain life, a big corporation saves the day by sending the rest of humanity into space where people can live in peace without needing to work or learn or do anything. Sounds pretty perfect, doesn't it? But what happens when the people decide that they'd rather not spend the rest of their lives doing absolutely nothing on a spaceship that's going absolutely nowhere? The Hunger Games. In the Hunger Games, after natural disasters and wars destroy most of the world, the new country of Panem rises from the ashes. They try to create a perfect society by dividing the country into 13 districts plus a capital, where everyone can specialize in a specific industry. That works out great until the citizens realize that the people in the capital don't actually do anything. They just live off of what the people in the districts produce. A rebellion against the capital leads to this dystopia becoming even more cruel and unjust. Themes in dystopian stories. Most dystopian stories share common themes or messages, and you'll notice that how the dystopia was originally created usually affects the eventual theme of the story. For example, the danger of a particular type of government. It would be a lot easier for the government to find terrorists and criminals if only they weren't limited by people's desire for privacy. But what if the government monitored everything we did and said and punished individualism as a crime? The danger of a particular policy. Overpopulation could become a big problem with too many people competing for a dwindling supply of resources. If only there was a fair way of limiting the population. But what kind of problems would it cause if the government went so far as to make it illegal to have any more than 2 children? The danger of allowing one group to have too much power. Wouldn't it be convenient if you could make all of your purchases and keep track of all of your personal information with a simple tattoo on your arm? But what problems could come with giving every piece of personal information about yourself to one business corporation? The importance of free will and individuality. Wouldn't life be better and happier if everyone were equally beautiful? No one would judge others, there would be no jealousy, and everyone would get along. But would you be okay with giving up your individuality? The danger of technology. We all love the internet and texting on our cell phones, but what if we took that technology way too far? Would it be cool if our brains were directly connected to the internet? What kinds of problems could this level of connectedness cause? The danger of desensitization. Wouldn't it be intense to watch a reality TV show where real people, try to hunt one another down and kill each other? But what would that kind of entertainment do to our humanity? The importance of humanity. If humanity's very survival were threatened, we would do just about anything to guarantee our survival. But are there some lines we shouldn't cross, some things we shouldn't do, even in the name of saving the world? The danger of human nature. What if a bunch of teenagers were left to themselves on a deserted island? How awesome would it be if you didn't have to deal with adults anymore? But what terrible things might some teenagers do if there were no adults around to enforce any kind of rules? So, is this a perfect world? Or a dystopia? This Prezi was made by Arik Durfee and provided to me to show to you guys. We are going to begin studying The Giver, which is by Lois Lowry, which is a dystopian young adult novel. And we're going to be using some of these elements to study the genre of dystopian fiction. I hope you enjoyed. Bye.